All right, we'll get this show going. So, welcome everybody. It's so wonderful to see participants from all around the world joining us today. Thank you so much for taking your time to be here. On behalf of Contact North, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar, How to Be in Educational Technology, an Entangled Perspective on Teaching. My name is Sarah Gover. I'm the Director of Teach Online and the Online Learning News at Contact North, and I'll be your host for this session. I would like to begin with a provincial land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge Contact North's work and the work of our community partners takes place on traditional Indigenous territories across the province. We are grateful to be able to live and work on these lands. We express our gratitude to the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples who have cared for these territories since time immemorial and who continue to strengthen communities across Ontario. So just before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. So we are using Zoom webinar today. So that means participants' microphones and cameras will remain off. The chat is open, but please do remember to select everyone in the drop-down menu when you're posting. If you have any questions, kindly use the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen. It has the little question mark box. And we'll pause a few times during the webinar to address these questions. You can also upvote any question that resonates with you by clicking the thumbs up icon. Live captioning is available. To activate it, simply click the closed caption icon at the bottom of the screen. And after the webinar, I will post the recording and presentation slides on teachonline.ca, and I will share that link in the chat shortly. So on to our main event. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Jon Dron, full professor and associate dean of learning and assessment in the Faculty of Science and Technology at Athabasca University. Welcome, Jon, and thank you so much for joining us today.
I was enjoying that so much, I completely forgot where my mouse had gone. Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you so much to everybody here many of whom I know and love, and I'm very glad to see you all, or at least to see those funny little icons that somehow represent you. I'm going to be talking today about technology, and I guess I ought to share my screen, my slides, because otherwise it's going to be a little bit boring. I should start by saying that I'm coming to you today from my office, which is located on the unceded traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh. Although actually, technically speaking, I'm on the waters of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh, which have been reclaimed from the sea, but that's another story. You'll notice I don't have a blurry background or anything strange and weird. I used to have a giant picture of my cat about to eat me, but I realized that actually that's kind of problematic because distance learning isn't. Learning always happens wherever you are now, and the place that you're in kind of matters. Tina's asking, will the slides be shared after the webinar? I will certainly share them on my website. I think it matters that I'm here, and it matters that here we are in this fragmented, tenaciously held together temporary network, but it matters that we live in real places. And this particular real place is sort of fascinating because I'm standing here surrounded by thousands and thousands of types of technology. And billions, if not trillions, of individual instances of technology. I mean, in any of the many computers that are sitting here, there are tens of billions of transistors in the CPUs alone. And I'm here, and my office here is a technology, and the house in which it is a technology, and Vancouver, the city where I live, is a technology. And some of those technologies really matter. I've got here is a a sculpture of my mother made by my father from a brick being another technology. Here's a typewriter that used to be owned by my grandmother, a chess set that my parents gave me. I don't know if this one's going to scan across far enough. A guitar that my wife gave me. And all of these books, I'm going to be spending a lot of time today talking about this one or using ideas from this one. This is How Education Works, published last year. But the pictures I'm going to be using are actually going to be not from this one. They're going to be generated by ChatGPT. Thank you, ChatGPT. I should have given you an acknowledgement. This one is actually, there's an inscription in it, and I'll read the inscription because it's just gives a sense of how technologies tie us to our histories, to our lives, to the people around us. And this one is to John, with love from Uncle Simmy and Gaga, Christmas 1963. 61 years old. Oh, goodness me. A little bit kind of shocking. And these things matter. We are a technologically mediated species. And this is going to be a talk about technology, but it's going to be about technology from an extremely human perspective. And I'm going to start this off with by trying to get you to do something, which is, and hopefully at some point I will be able to figure out how to make this happen. Because I did have this really neat little remote control that was going to do this for me, but unfortunately, of course, I don't. So let's instead move to the manual way of doing this. And let me find the poll and the quiz, and let me relaunch it and allow you to vote. So let me see. Hopefully you'll see in front of you a poll, and tell me if you don't. Yeah, and I can see that people are answering it. So we've got some possible answers to this thing here. A is a learning management system, B is an online quiz, C is a school, and D is a branch that has fallen from a tree. And I'm seeing a lot of all from aboves, all of the above. I'm seeing quite a few A, B's, and C's. Yeah, and some A's and B's. Not seeing any D's. And I'm not seeing any none of the aboves. So I'm gonna end this poll because I think we've got 74% participate, 75, 76%. You're still thinking about it. Some of you are still trying to find that link on the screen, and that's all good. Let me end the poll and share the results just so that you can see what you thought. And I think that it is pretty much what I would have expected from this one. Some of you may have had, oh, we had one, none of the above. That's excellent to see. So I'll move on to that D, which absolutely nobody gave any answers to, because I think it could become a technology. I don't know whether you have the chat visible. Apparently I don't. Let me see the chat. There we go. So, yeah. Any ideas? I mean, how could that become a technology? Any thoughts there in the chat? Let's have a look. Dave is saying, honed into the shape of a ruler and applied to undependent children for a biology course to make fire. That's a possible one. What about? I mean, Dave's already pointed out at least one possible learning technology. Oh yes, Elizabeth, you can point at things. A technology by the way we use the stick. Yeah, Derek, you've read my book. Indeed, it can become testing nervous distribution. I love that. Oh, So many possibilities. I mean, there are phenomena about this stick that could actually turn it into a technology, and this raises the question of what is a technology, and I need to start with saying that when I talk about technology, I'm not talking about things with flashing lights or things that you find in the technology sections of stores. And I'm definitely not talking about it as the appliance of science, because there are as much technologies of prayer as there are technologies of steam. Science had little to do even with the invention of the steam engine. That was Newcomen was an ironmonger, not a scientist. Lots of people have come up with lots of definitions, and I spent about 10 years reading lots of them. I like Ursula Franklin's How Things Are Done Around Here. That's quite a good one because it's equally true of culture, or an annoyingly vague abstraction. That's nice as that one. There are some lovely frivolous ones. Alan Kay has anything invented since you were born, or Danny Hillis talks about everything that doesn't quite work yet. But these are obviously talking about the flashing light variant of technology, and not what I'm talking about. Max Frisch talks about the knack of so arranging the world so that we don't have to experience it. All of these things are possibly true, except that we do experience the world through technologies, and much of the world that we see is either a technology or a technologically mediated. I'm going to use a definition throughout this, calling it the organization of stuff to do stuff. Now, I take this from Brian Arthur. Brian Arthur wrote a wonderful book, and I have it on my bookshelf, actually, so you can see it. It's called The Nature of Technology, What It Is, and How It Evolves. I found this enormously inspiring, and if you haven't read it, I thoroughly read. Oh, right next to The Real World of Technology, Ursula Franklin. How about that? It's almost like it's organized. But the orchestration of phenomena to our use is about the best definition that I've found, because it captures much of the essence of a technology. Because a technology is not just a thing. It's not just an object that's sitting on the desk, like this remote control that is not the one that I'm looking for. It is it's the doing of the thing as well, and that notion is captured by the orchestration of phenomena to our use. I organize stuff to do stuff for reasons that will become clear in a couple of slides' time. But it's really lots of stuff. Really tons and tons of stuff that can be organized. In fact, any stuff can be organized. And that includes ideas, that includes dreams, that includes beliefs about supernatural beings. It includes, obviously, objects and cogwheels and stuff like that. But it equally includes words. Language is perhaps the primal technology. I don't know. I mean, but I like to think that probably, that's really how all of this starts. We put things together in interesting different ways, and maybe there are people who think that language is instinctive, but that I think is whatever the truth of that may be. Languages themselves are definitely invented things. They're definitely technological in character. Writing, of course, very much is. Theories and models, principles. These are all technological in character. They're all the organization of stuff to do stuff. And then this leads to a really quite important insight, I think, from the perspective at least of what I'm going to be talking about today, which is that pedagogies, or by which I mean pedagogical methods, are technologies too. So we're all learning technologists. I mean, we're all use technologies to learn. I mean, if you're using, whether you're using a whiteboard, whether you're trying to memorize things in your head or whatever it is, you're using a bunch of pedagogical methods. And so, of course, you are a learning technologist. Some of us get involved in different kinds of technologies, but that's what it is. And that leads to another kind of important insight, because the stuff that is organized to do stuff very commonly, and in fact, probably in about 99% of all cases, includes other stuff that is organized to do stuff. Technologies are assemblies, as Brian Arthur puts it. That's how they evolve. We create new technologies by assembling old technologies and by modifying old technologies. So it's very unusual, very rare indeed, to find an example of a standalone technology. I cannot think of one, in fact. Technologies are assemblies. And that matters from the point of view of pedagogies, because there aren't any naked pedagogies. And that means that pedagogies never come first. It doesn't mean that, I mean, they don't, it makes as much sense to put pedagogies first as it does to, say, well, if you're building a car, wheels come first, or engines come first, or the ergonomics of the car, or the traffic regulations come first. I mean, a lot of things, driving comes first when you're designing a car. Yeah, I mean, you could put it first if you like, but really, you cannot think of any part of that separate from the rest. None of it would work if you didn't have the rest of it happening. And certainly, if we're talking about things like courses, which are a very particular kind of pedagogical thing, there are many things that come first before we start doing a course and even, well, what it's about, as a for example. And it is very important that we should never forget the pedagogical purpose. If we're designing something for people to learn from, then it's important that the use that we put it to, the stuff that we want to do, is learning. But the methods for doing it, nah, not so much. No such thing as a naked pedagogy. And I've been talking about using things, using a pedagogy, and what does it actually mean to use a technology? This is a question which suddenly occurred to me in the middle of the night a little while ago, and it occurred to me that actually I have an answer to that one. Because using a technology is organizing that technology to do something. I've found my remote control. What I'm using it to do is to go backwards. Well, I would if it worked, to go backwards or, okay, well, that didn't happen. But if it worked, I would be using it to go backwards or forwards in my slides. And in doing so, I'm making use of techniques to do this. And the technique can be very simple. It can be as simple as switching a light switch on and off, or it could be incredibly complicated, like playing a guitar. So the thing is, what's really important about this is that the use itself is a technology. It is the organization of stuff to do stuff. So when we talk about technologies, it makes no sense to talk about them as something that as naked things. I mean, it does if you want to buy a computer or you're designing a computer or whatever, maybe there are some very sensible use cases where you can talk about a technology as just being a technology. But most of the time, what we're talking about is what we do with the technology. And this sort of matters because we're participants in our technologies. We're not just users of them. We participate in them. We're part of the technology. And really quite importantly too, they participate in us. So there's an awful lot of intracranial, I can't pronounce that, intracranial technologies. What a terrible word, but what a lovely word. Because there are technologies that exist only in my head. I'm using some of them now. I'm thinking about things with words and grammar and mental arithmetic. There's no significant difference between doing arithmetic on a piece of paper or using a calculator or in your head. Perhaps some of the mechanisms are different, but in all cases, we're orchestrating phenomena to some use. I sing songs in my head. It infuriates my wife. And she says, "What are you thinking?" And I say, technologies exist in us. We exist in technologies. Technologies are fundamentally and crucially human. And the way in which we participate. I'm going to use the word technique. Now, this is a slightly specialized use of the word technique, but I think it's pretty intuitive. It's certainly, I mean it to mean the same things that people mean when they talk about their technique for doing something, or their technique for playing a violin, or writing an essay. It's what we do with what has been done. It's a technology that is enacted by a person. Or, and I had I written this 3 years ago, that's where I would probably have left it. I might have allowed that maybe crows use technologies, and I mean, there's a few others that do, but I'm now going to say or other intelligent agents. And I'll have a slide about that too coming up fairly shortly. Um, but the way in which we participate in technologies can be quite varied. And I think there are two very distinct ways in which we participate in technologies. And I'm calling them soft technique and hard technique. I sometimes talk about soft technologies and hard technologies, and I'm getting less fond of that. But soft technique and hard technique. So soft technique is stuff that soft things are flexible. Soft things can be malleable. They can be changed. So soft technique would be the kind of things like, for example, when we're drawing, or we're writing, or we're composing a piece of music, or we're sculpting, or whatever. It's something where we're adding something to something that is already there. One of the interesting things about, and one of the reasons I quite like thinking about soft technologies and hard technologies, this is a pen. It's actually a fountain pen. You don't see many of those nowadays, and it's completely useless unless I do something with it. It's filled with gaps. It's a latent technology. I mean, you can call it a technology. It certainly is. It's a piece of machined aluminum, and it is rather delightful. It comes from Muji. I like it very much, but it is. It only really becomes a pen when I use it with a piece of paper and start writing or drawing or whatever else I might want to do with it. I could use it for stabbing someone, and that in itself is rather interesting. There's interpretive flexibility in every possible technology that allows us to do things that the inventor didn't plan for us to do. But and then there are things like light switches or forms that you had to fill in for the tax, or multiple choice quizzes where you have to do the thing correctly. You might need to do it with skill, but there is only one correct way in which to do it. It's now let me get onto another slide, because I'm going to talk about this for at least another couple of slides. So with a soft technology, we are the orchestrators, or with our soft technique, we orchestrate. We do something that nobody's ever done before. When I'm using these words have never come out of my mouth in this order and expressed in this way ever before, and they never will again, and nor will they come out of your mouths. And every time we say something, we're orchestrating, we're creating a new technology, we're instantiating a new technology. But then there are other things where we're part of the orchestra, where we're part of the orchestration. If I've got a watch on my wrist here, 25 past 10 in my land, and if I played my role in this watch any differently from the way in which I have just done, it wouldn't work as a watch. I don't know, I might be able to use it to tell the direction. Was the sun gone over there somewhere? I could probably figure out where north was, but then I would be using a different technology, and that's kind of an important thing, that the same technological object that we're using, that we're participating in, is not necessarily the same technology. That stick that you were coming up with uses for earlier on, it became a different technology every time you came up with a different use, but it was still the same stick. So soft technique, we orchestrate. Hard technique, we're part of the orchestration. And this comes to, brings me to the epigraph of the book. And an opportunity to make a complete and utter fool of myself. Things can go horribly wrong at this point in the proceedings, and they would and I wish I had practiced this one before, because I can no longer see a very important button, which is, oh, there we go. How does turn on original sounds work? Maybe that's the answer, because this is the epigraph of the book. And what I'm hoping is that when I do this, my voice should subtly change, because otherwise this particular technology I'm using would fail to orchestrate what I want to orchestrate, which is to actually sing you a song about this, because I'd like you to remember this. And what better way to remember something than in a song? So I'm going to sing you this song. Oh boy, why did I do this? Oh, it ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. Ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. Ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. That's all I can resolve. Oh, it ain't what you say, it's the way that you say it. Ain't what you say, it's the way that you say it. Ain't what you say, it's the way that you say it. That's what gets resolved. You can try hard, don't mean a thing. Take it easy, easy. Then your guy will swing. It ain't what you say, it's the way that you say it. Ain't what you do, it's the time that you do it. Ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. That's what gets results. Well, that's what gets results. Woo! Okay, that happened. Why did I do that? Well, partly because it keeps everyone awake, certainly kept me awake. But also, I need to turn off the original sound now. Okay. Because otherwise, oh, thank you. I can see in the chat the multiple hoots and clapping hands. Well, you don't get many of those in online learning talks, do you? So it's a song by Oliver and Young that was popularized by Jimmy Lunsford and has been done by people like Ella Fitzgerald and the Fun Boy 3. But the thing is, whatever technologies we use, when we add soft technique, it becomes another technology. And the technology it becomes is the one that matters, because this is where the creativity, the talent, the problem solving, the invention, and the mistakes come in. Because the thing is, you can do any soft technique well or badly. And sticking with the musical theme, how I did that song is different from how I've ever done it any time ever in the past. It's also I like various genres. I mean, I don't think there is any genre I completely hate. Well, no, I won't say it because people will be offended. But you know, a blues song with 3 songs and slightly fluffed chords and old broken strings can sound as absolutely sublime as the most beautifully orchestrated piece of Mozart. You can, and to say that it musically a song by blind by somebody whose name I can for some reason not remember, is any better or worse than anyone else's, is at least hubris. And this sort of teacher, novice teacher, doing it for the first time can sometimes teach better than a veteran of 30, 40 years. And they can use terrible methods, but they can add something new to make them sparkle. I once coached a colleague, wonderful fellow, finest teacher, one of the finest teachers I've ever known. He'd written a statement of relevance, and it was absolutely everything that I think anybody here who's ever been an educator would say, no, just don't do it. You know, the ways of sort of punishing students and giving them flash quizzes and doing full frontal lectures and, I mean, everything was bad about the methods, but the thing is, he did them incredibly well. And what happened was that he wound up becoming an award-winning teacher despite the fact that, from my naive perspective, as thinking that I knew something about what pedagogies worked and what didn't, his pedagogical methods were appalling. Uh, so that's if there's one message you remember from this talk, that's a good message to remember. There are a couple of others that might be important. As an aside, by the way, I mean, what I've found quite interesting about generative AI, such as ChatGPT and so on, is that they're the first technologies that have ever been created that can do soft technique as well, like us. Kind of like us. Sidney Harris wrote ages ago, well, he's been dead for ages, so probably was. The real danger is not that computers will begin to think like men, but that men will begin to think like computers. And that is my fear as we start to learn from these things that have this soft technique that we will become somewhat different and maybe not better. But that's just an aside. That's not really what I'm talking about today. Some important things, to say that it ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it, that's what gets results. It's not entirely that, because there are constraints that technologies will impose upon us. And the more and more automation we put into them, the more we pass over to those technologies, the more they constrain. So Stuart Brand has this lovely concept of pace layering, where the slow parts of a complex system influence the faster moving parts more than vice versa. The concept of path dependencies, where what you've done leads to it constrains what you can do in future. And the thing is, hard technologies, hard technique must be done correctly. So that is rigid. That's stuff that cannot change, or at least it can't change that much. Everybody has different handwriting, but if you make the letters too dissimilar to whatever kind of archetype you're using, then nobody else can read it, and there's sort of no point in doing it. And so there is a certain amount of hardness must be there, or the technology will just fail to work altogether. And the thing is, soft technologies have to work their ways around that. And that can be a little bit problematic because, for example, a learning management system, which is a pretty soft thing, it's got a lot of gaps, but it does have a number of assumptions built in, that there will be courses, that the courses will have a certain duration, a fixed duration, that there will be somebody will be in charge of it, they'll have the role of a teacher and so on. These things are hard baked into the learning management system. And so our pedagogies have to work their way around that. We had to either find ways of subverting it, or we go along with the tide. And I'm afraid most of us do go along with the tide because life is too short. So there isn't such a thing as technological determinism. That's ridiculous. But there is certainly technological momentum. And the hard technologies can be very influential. I should mention that hard technique, it doesn't have to be something that's automated into a machine. The hardest of all are the rules that we have to follow. The policies and procedures, those of us who are in universities will understand full well what I mean here. They can be the least flexible of things, and what we have to do with them is to build things around them. And it's usually possible to do that. I mean, even if you've got a nuclear reactor, which is pretty much a single purpose device, it makes a very good clothes drying device. There's I brought in the term there, adjacent possibles, and that's the flip side of this. The adjacent possible empty niche, to be precise. Stuart Kauffman came up with this term, that everything we creates new possibilities for the creation of further things. It's the dynamic that lies behind evolution. It's the ratchet that lifts evolution up. It's why things become more complex. And it's true of technology too. Brian Arthur spends a lot of time talking about that in his book that I showed you earlier. And what we've seen, in fact, over thousands, if not tens of thousands of years, has been an exponential increase in the sophistication and availability of technologies that we've only started to notice really quite recently, because we've reached that point in the curve where it's more or less going vertically at the moment. Although some technologies, technologies of travel, technologies of writing, computers, the internet, artificial intelligence, mass production, communication technologies, some of them create very discontinuous leaps upwards. They make it possible for more people to get those technologies and hence therefore to be able to create new ones. So important point, you can always add something to a technology to soften it. Um, and technologies are always pregnant with possibility. They have adjacent possibles. So everything we create makes more things possible. Every word that you utter creates new possibilities. Because the thing is, we are, as I mentioned before, creating technologies all the time. Our soft technique is the continuous creation of something that's never been in the world before. And that's what makes us smart. Because have you ever learned anything on your own without anyone else, without having learned something from someone else that would make it possible for you to learn something? Yeah, I mean, maybe you could touch something hot and you would learn not to touch something hot, possibly. But really, almost all of our intelligence, and certainly the ways we make sense of things, comes from our ancestors and from the people around us and from the objects and the artifacts that they create. All of our attitudes and values and beliefs in this massively recursive, complex thing that leads to the collective intelligence and the individual intelligence human beings. So all intelligence is collective, and I think that's fair. And so is all teaching. Because the person who stands up in front of a class or who does something online that like this is certainly not the only teacher. The environments in which we live are teaching us all of the time. And when we design traditional in-person universities and schools and colleges and things of that ilk, they are playing a very active role in the teaching process. Um, the corridors are places where students can meet. Just simply the fact that they have to walk along them has an effect on learning. The fact that there are libraries there and people around who are doing things in libraries that inspire us to do things or that teach us ways of doing things is hugely significant. The chairs, the ways that things are designed, door handles. I'm in the world of distributed cognition here, so what we're when we're learning something, we're not learning it from the teacher. We're learning it from all of the things around. And in a typical classroom, a textbook is created by teachers, the editors, the illustrators, the authors, and so on. So we're not just participants in learning. We're co-participants. Our thoughts mingle. The technologies make it possible for our thoughts to become part of one another's thoughts. And we're just there's curriculum standards makers, education departments, architects, presidents and principals, head teachers, vice chancellors, publishers, librarians, designers of libraries, John Dewey, Melville Dewey, the other students around, of course, hugely important. Think of what of who made what is around you right now and how it participates in your learning at this very moment. Think of the computer the screen you're looking at, or the whatever kind of device it is that you're using. What kind of a role is it playing in your learning at the moment? And think about how you learn to speak, to write, to calculate, and we are swimming in a sea of teachers. There is almost nothing around us that does not teach or participate in our cognition so that we can learn more, for better or worse. And that I think is actually, sorry, people who work in in-person universities, but it's remarkable how few of them have actually learned how to teach, and they don't have to because the environment itself teaches. You don't actually have to teach very well in a university. You just set some goals, and these very smart people who you've filtered to get into your university will figure it out for themselves because the resources are there, the curriculum's been designed, the library's there, etc. And it's not dissimilar in an online context. It's just there are different designers involved. But the most important person who's doing all of this, though, of course, is the person who's doing the organization of stuff is the learner. Whatever we do and whatever is around them, the actual technology that matters is the technology of learning that the learner is using. It's how they assemble the stuff that we have provided. So educational systems create adjacent possibles. They make it possible for learning to happen. They provide some parts, but the learner brings the rest and makes the whole. And that's important because it ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. But it ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it and the way that everyone else does it. Everyone else who is a co-participant in this, that's what gets results. How's my timing? Nearly right, I think. So I promised that I would explain a bunch of stuff. That was the theory, by the way. I might remember a few other things to throw in along the way that are vaguely related to this, but essentially that's the essence of some of the main parts of the theory in the book, How Education Works. There's a lot more to it, and the arguments are a little bit more solid than the ones that I've made today. But let's go through a few weird things in education. Yeah, this is a question that a lot of people keep trying to answer. I've read lots of papers about this. Some of them actually come up with answers. Isn't that wonderful? That you can come up with you can say, yeah, computers in classrooms don't improve learning outcomes. Well, they do. Okay. It's a stupid question. Do transistors in classrooms improve learning outcomes? Do screws in classrooms improve learning outcomes? Does whatever teaching method you think happens to be great, social constructivist teaching in classrooms, problem-based learning, inquiry-based learning, does it improve learning outcomes? Stupid question. Because yeah, I mean, we can say did it in this particular case, but this particular case was unique in the history of all possible universes. It's the unprestatable possibilities of the adjacent possibles that were in that context mean that something very unique happened that will never be replicated ever again in the future. And what's really important about this, of course, is that I mean, yes, in some sort of ideal world, the computers might improve learning outcomes in classrooms, but only like the stick if you add to them a whole bunch of other really important things, the pedagogies. And the thing is that the pedagogies are soft technique. And so therefore it matters more than anything else that it's done well. I mean, if you use the perfect pedagogical technique and you do it terribly and it's kind of boring, dull, then it's not going to work any better or worse than somebody who's using a terrible technique but with passion. And my friend that I spoke of was doing exactly that. And the thing is, it ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it, and it's the way that everyone else does it. So asking questions about do computers in classroom improve learning outcomes in classrooms, or does problem-based learning improve learning outcomes is really not going to give us any useful answers, because we have to know all of the rest of the stuff. We have to know about the whole and not just the parts. Just focusing on a part really doesn't help us know anything at all. Bloom's 2 sigma challenge. I don't know if you're familiar with Bloom's 2 sigma problem. The essence of it is that it showed fairly conclusively in an absolutely wonderful paper that personal tuition or small group tuition gives students a 2 sigma advantage over traditional methods of teaching. And traditional methods being, classroom lectures and tutorials and so on. As we measure such things, and let me do the scare quotes there in a big way, because what we're talking about is did they learn stuff that we measured? Um, and the thing is, this was about 30 or 40 years ago that he put this challenge, and nobody has met the challenge yet. We can sometimes do well, but not repeatedly, because it ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. The thing is, it's not a method. Small group tuition or personal tuition is not a method of teaching, it's a situation. And so, of course, you can't compare any and all possible methods that could be used in personal tuition with one particular method. No matter how good that method is, if you found one, then personal tutors could do it and still stay ahead. It's an unfair challenge. And it's one that, in principle, should never be could never be met. What else? The no significant difference phenomenon. You should know where this one is going now. The no significant difference phenomenon, stretching back to the 1920s, people who compare the use of technologies with use of other technologies have found that, for instance, there's no significant difference on average between learning outcomes in an online classroom or an in-person classroom, as we measure such things. But it's which by now should not be surprising to you, because it ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. So in-person online learning can be done well or badly. That's basically all that it comes down to. In these two pictures here, thank you, ChatGPT, and gosh, it took me a long time to persuade it that there weren't going to be any computers in one of those pictures. You can see that the methods of teaching have, and I know it's ChatGPT coming up with something, but the method of teaching is very clearly changed in this, despite the fact that the teacher is in exactly the same position with exactly the same whiteboard. There's a very different dynamic going on in this classroom. When you change one thing, it changes everything else. And so it's always the whole that matters, not the parts. One possible exception when you've got something incredibly mechanical, like an SAT, for example, you could possibly do comparisons with that, but that's not learning. That's not, or if it is, it's learning some really bad things. Being taught habits. This is one of my favorite things. This is the notion of learning styles, which I hope nobody here thinks are a thing. You see, the problem with learning styles is that when you teach to somebody's learning style, it really, on average, makes no difference to learning outcomes. And that, again, should not be a terrible surprise, because it's far less important the method that is used than the way in which it's done. If I teach to somebody's visual style, you can probably tell that I have very poor visual design skills. So it would be not too surprising if they wound up having a less wonderful experience than had I written it, where I could write reasonably well. But the thing is, teachers themselves have a style, and it will be more or less effective. And of course, research will show that it has no particular impact. But the real thing is that I'm calling them being taught habits, because these ways of learning, they are technologies. They're pedagogical methods that students have learned, probably very, very early in life. And they're not something which is innate. And those skills can be improved, those skills can change. So it's doing learners a disservice to teach to a particular style. Really, they should be learning to learn in different ways, because that's going to serve them better in the long run. See a question there from Mark. Do computers in classrooms improve learning outcomes? Agreed, they're stupid questions. However, what is my take on the fact that a lot of countries have come to the conclusion that mobile phones in classrooms do worse than learning outcomes, and have therefore banned them, arguing about distraction and similar? Yes, of course. It's because it's the whole thing that matters. It's the orchestration that matters. Now, if you're setting up classrooms so that The learners have to pay attention to the teacher and do what the teacher tells them and to comply with the teacher's demands, then yeah, those cell phones are going to be a distraction. If you're going to use them, you need to think about the orchestration. You think about how you're organizing the stuff to do stuff within the context of the power structures that exist in typical schools and the mass production standards that they tend to be based on. Yeah, I'm sure on average, mobile phones in classrooms probably are distracting. But you could change something else about that classroom apart from getting rid of mobile phones. Uh, that would be my answer to that one. So I think I didn't press a button saying answer live. Yes, I did answer that live. Okay, no open questions. Tell me if you've got any follow-ups to that one. I'm heading towards the end of this. I'll try and leave 5 minutes so that anyone can chat and I can stick around afterwards. Teaching models, which teaching models work best? And Terry Anderson and I divided generations of distance learning pedagogies into three. We used to call them behaviorist constructivist as the first generation, and social constructivist as the second generation, and connectivist as the third. But really, those are just illustrations of the broad things of objectivism, subjectivism, and complexism. And there's a million and one different isms, and we all have our preferred approaches and beliefs about how learning works. Shout out to Dave there for rhizomatic learning. I see Dave is around here. So which of them work best? Well, you know my answer already. It's all of them. And actually, interestingly enough, if a fair bit of work, John Hattie, marvelous thing, his visible learning stuff is found that direct instruction actually, as we measure such things, is far better than problem-based learning and other active learning approaches, subjectivist learning approaches. And that's not surprising, because the further we go up this tree and the further we go up this pole from objectivist to complexivist ways of going about doing the learning thing, it gets softer. The amount of technique that is required of the people who are involved in it becomes greater, and it's soft technique. So, of course, on average, teachers are average, students are average. So on average, the outcomes for something that requires them to do a lot of creative assembly is going to be worse than something that has been produced by a team of experts and just kind of works. So on average, the average learner will actually do better with direct instruction. Luckily, no learner in the world is average. There's no such thing as an average learner. So these averages are terrible things for concealing what's actually going on in a classroom and the actual human stuff that is happening. And in fact, when you look at any kind of learning context, including this one, you'll see all elements of objectivist, subjectivist, and complexivist stuff going on. There's stuff around you that is affecting you and engaging and participating in your learning at the moment. There are people who are having some fine conversations that I will enjoy looking back on, because I can see Dave as being interesting. And Derek's asking about my thoughts on Pappett's constructionism. Great idea. Yeah, to me, it requires the organization of stuff to accomplish stuff. I'm a big fan of constructionism. But you see, in any one of these sorts of things, there are going to be elements of at some point, you're going to have to explain something to somebody. You will have, or the participants in the learning event will have a model in their head of how people learn. When they're trying to communicate something, they will communicate it using some assumptions, some pedagogical assumptions. They will teach in a way in which they believe somebody will learn it. And you can find, and especially if you look at something like a traditional university where you've got cork boards and stuff that are playing a very much as kind of connectivist role in participating in learning. You've got subjectivist things going on in tutorial groups. where people are doing the social constructivist thing, and you've got the communities of inquiry that are developing, and you've got all this objectivist stuff happening. So actually, yeah, none of them, of course, and all of them. They're just different ways of different technologies for thinking about how we learn. Nearly at the end here, that Hattie also makes the point that everything works, including nothing. I was once in a math class when I was very little, I was 15 or 16, when the math teacher went AWOL for a year, and we didn't really have any substitutes for it. Unsurprisingly, the class did considerably better by almost an order of magnitude than any class ever previously in the school. And the thing is, it's not that we were lacking in a teacher, it was that we had each other, it was that we had textbooks, it was that we had a really nice classroom, and all of those things orchestrated together, the whole thing, made for a really good learning experience that was actually better than it would have been had we been controlled by a teacher. So, I mean, what does make a difference? Well, if it is about the soft technique, then it matters that we can do the human thing. So having passion for learning, for teaching, for the subject that we're teaching, that makes a difference. You know, having compassion for learners, that makes a difference. Having skill and talent, being able to use more of the technologies, all of the technologies that we use, matters. The fact that it took me a little while to find out how to switch on the singing mode for Zoom is, you know, that you need to know that. We need to know all of this. Punya Mishra's EPAC model is a teaching, pedagogical, and content knowledge. These are all kinds of technology, but we need to know them all, because the more we know and the better we're able to use them, the more adjacent possibles there are. And really, the big thing is about understanding the whole. And again, I'm going to call on Hattie, I like the concept very much of visible learning, that we need to understand how students are experiencing this. If we're going to teach properly, we need to know about all of those other teachers. And it's especially how the learners are learning, not what they produce, how they're producing it. And that just speaks to the essence of this, which is that it's the whole thing that matters, not the parts. No individual part is going to make a big difference unless it actually causes active harm. And there are things that do. Some motivational methods are actively harmful, for example, rewards and punishments and grades and things, they're actively harmful. But what matters is how you put the whole thing together. Once you've dealt with the harm, the good comes from how we organize the stuff to do stuff. All of us, everyone in the entire world. And that brings me to about 1 minute left of talking. Okay, I do see a question from Anne-Marie. Couldn't agree with you more on methods here. Right approach for the right context. But my experience is that the different methods tend to be more sticky in different disciplines. Yeah, and to what extent should we be compelled to step outside our disciplinary boundaries, learn some of this breadth? Well, I think we need to step outside our disciplinary boundaries, because disciplinary boundaries are a thing that happens as a result of path dependencies that happen as a result of the ways in which universities could be easily organized. So comfort zones really not great things. We have cultures that develop, and culture is really just the hard technologies that surround a particular grouping of people, whatever they are. So there are different cultures for families and groups of friends and organizations and companies and disciplines. And there are some disciplines where the things are done in particular ways. We tend to do them differently. So I would say we shouldn't be compelled ever to step outside, because you can always do something great with something that isn't. And so as long as you do it well, then I don't think it matters that you can't use all of these adjacent possibles. I think that having more adjacent possibles, and this is the advantage of learning to be a teacher, and this is the advantage of learning about different technologies and tech, the stuff with the flashing lights, then that it's advantageous, but it's not essential. Does that answer the question? I'm seeing thanks and buys from people who obviously need to leave. It's not what you strum, it's how you strum it. Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's. I'm happy to stick around if anybody needs to stick around, wants to stick around. Understand that people do have lives to go to. Maybe I can, at this point, and pass it across to Sarah to rather than trying to control everything myself. And I will stop sharing and come back fully on screen as my live self.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Jon. I'm just looking to see if I don't see any other questions, and I think you put up your contact information. So if anybody has, or you can always send an email to me and I can forward it to Dr. Dron after if anyone has anything they would like to follow up with him or questions or whatnot. So I'll take this opportunity to thank you very much, Dr. Dron. That's an insightful presentation and for sharing your experiences with us and your expertise and for serenading us. That's definitely a Contact North first. I'll have to admit that it's ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it will be playing in my head for the rest of the day. A big thank you to our participants for attending and engaging with your thoughtful questions. Just let everyone know that I will be posting the recording to this session. Feel free to share it with colleagues that weren't able to attend live today. And that will be on Teach Online after this session has processed. Any other further questions or feedback, feel free to reach out. We appreciate your time and hope to see you at our next Contact North webinar, which will be Tuesday, October 29th, called How to Enhance Student Engagement and Success with AI Tutor Pro. It'll be hosted by Ron Austin, our Contact North Research Associate in AI in Higher Education. So thank you very much, Dr. Dron, and thank you everyone for attending and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Sarah. That was great. I will be posting these slides at jondron.ca. So if anybody wants the slides, they're very orange. They're nice to keep. You will be able to download them from my site. It will take me a little while because I have meetings and things, but at some point later today in Pacific time, the slides will become available.
Excellent. Thanks so much. All right. Take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Bye now.